5 years after my marriage ended, I thought I had finally learned how to live without wondering whether the man who broke my heart ever regretted it. So, when I received an invitation to a winter charity gala at the historic Fairmont estate outside Savannah, Georgia, I almost declined because I knew my former husband Evan would probably be there. But my younger sister Claire insisted that I come because the Scholarship Foundation was honoring her work. And my husband Marcus promised that if the evening became uncomfortable, we would leave without explanation. I arrived wearing a simple emerald dress with Marcus beside me and our 4-year-old daughter Lily holding my hand, believing the night would be nothing more than dinner, speeches, soft piano music, and polite conversations with people I had not seen since the divorce, until I noticed Evan across the ballroom beside his new wife Vanessa, wearing the same confident expression he had carried the day he told me that leaving me was the greatest decision he had ever made. And suddenly 5 years of carefully buried memories came rushing back with a force I had not expected. Ivan approached me before dinner, complimented my dress, asked whether I was still teaching evening business courses, and then casually described his expensive house, his growing company, and the vacations he and Vanessa had taken, as though he were presenting evidence in a courtroom where he still needed to prove that he had won. And when he leaned closer and quietly said, "You know, Natalie, walking away from you was probably the smartest thing I ever did." I looked at him without the old ache I once would have felt and answered, "Then I hope you're satisfied with the life you chose." Because I had finally realized that some people need you to believe they destroyed you simply because admitting they destroyed something valuable would force them to face themselves. Before Evan could respond, a little girl in a silver velvet dress came running across the marble floor, shouting my name, threw her arms around my waist, and yelled, "Mummy, Marcus says I can have another cookie." And when Marcus appeared behind her carrying her forgotten purple scarf, Lily immediately reached up toward him and called, "Daddy, pick me up," causing Evan's expression to collapse so quickly that even Vanessa stopped smiling. Evan stared at Lily as Marcus lifted her into his, and I watched his eyes travel over her dark curls, bright green eyes, tiny crescent-shaped birthmark near her eyebrow, and familiar stubborn smile before he finally whispered, "How old is she?" And I replied, "4 years and 2 months." Because there was no reason to protect him from a truth he had once been given every opportunity to know, while Vanessa quietly asked, "Ivan, what is going on?" And he ignored her completely, staring at the child who had just called another man the name he had once assumed would always belong to him. I did not tell him that Lily had been born 3 months after our divorce, that he had received my doctor's letter confirming the pregnancy, that he had declined every invitation to attend the birth, or that he had once told me during our separation, "I don't want a child tying me to the past," because I knew those facts would hurt him more when they came from his own memories. And when he finally asked, "Is she mine?" I simply said, "You knew she could be Evan, but you chose not to find out." The truth about our marriage was more complicated than a single betrayal, because Evan had not suddenly become cruel overnight. He had gradually turned our home into a place where I felt like an employee rather than a wife, criticizing my clothes, questioning every grocery receipt, disappearing for entire evenings, protecting his phone like a secret diary, and making me believe that my growing loneliness was somehow evidence that I was difficult to love, while the woman he eventually left me for, Vanessa, had once been the person I called whenever I cried, the friend who sat in my kitchen drinking tea and promising that I deserved someone who appreciated me, which made discovering their affair feel less like one betrayal and more like watching two trusted doors close at the same time. The final break came when I discovered a hotel reservation hidden inside Evan's briefcase, confronted him at our kitchen table, and heard him say that he had outgrown our marriage. But instead of begging him to stay, I packed one suitcase, moved into a small rented townhouse, and discovered 2 weeks later that I was pregnant. A revelation that terrified me because I had no savings, no clear plan, and no idea how I would raise a child while rebuilding a life that had just collapsed. Those first years were painfully ordinary, which turned out to be exactly what saved me. Because while Evan disappeared into his new marriage and stopped answering my messages, I worked mornings at a community college, graded assignments after Lily fell asleep, learned how to repair leaking faucets from online videos, stretched grocery money until every dollar had a purpose, and slowly discovered that independence was not glamorous but was deeply satisfying when every small victory belonged to me. Marcus entered our lives without dramatic promises. First, as the quiet volunteer who helped carry boxes during a neighborhood literacy project, then as the man who remembered Lily's favorite strawberry yogurt, waited outside her preschool during a thunderstorm because I was stuck at work, learned how to braid her hair badly enough that she laughed for 10 minutes, and eventually became the person she searched for whenever she woke frightened in the middle of the night. And when I warned him that loving me meant accepting a complicated history and a child who would always come first, He smiled and said, I don't want to rescue you, Natalie, and I don't want to replace anyone. I just want to be here tomorrow and the day after that. Which was the first promise I believed because he proved it through thousands of ordinary actions rather than beautiful words. After the gala, Evan began calling, first politely, then desperately, insisting that he deserved a relationship with Lily, but I refused to let guilt or his sudden regret determine what was best for a 4 year old who barely understood why a strange man kept asking to see her. So I agreed to one supervised meeting at a public botanical garden, where Evan arrived carrying an enormous designer doll while Lily stayed close to Marcus and quietly asked me, Mommy, who is he? Evan looked wounded when she refused the expensive gift, but I told him gently, She isn't punishing you, Evan, because she doesn't remember you. And a child cannot miss someone who was never there. And over the following months, he slowly learned that fatherhood could not be purchased with toys, business trips, apologies, or photographs. Especially after he missed Lily's first school performance because of a meeting and arrived late to her fifth birthday carrying a battery powered car she never asked for. While Marcus continued showing up for the small moments Evan had once considered unimportant, including doctor appointments, bedtime stories, lost teeth feverish nights, kindergarten projects, scraped knees, pancake breakfasts, and the endless questions that children ask only the adults they trust. Eventually, Evan's marriage to Vanessa began to crumble as well, and when she finally told him, You don't miss the family you had, you miss the version of yourself who believed you could leave without consequences. He had no argument because for the first time he understood that losing his family had not been something that happened to him, it was something he had repeatedly chosen. Years later, Lily understood that Evan was her biological father, and I never lied to her or taught her to hate him, because children deserve truth without being burdened with adult resentment. But she also understood that love was measured by presence rather than genetics. And she still called Marcus daddy because he had earned that name through every ordinary morning, every frightened midnight, every school recital, every scraped knee, and every moment when he chose her without hesitation. Evan eventually stopped trying to force his way into Lily's life and began sending birthday cards, letters, and small books instead, leaving the decision about those memories for Lily when she was old enough to make it herself, while Marcus and I continued building the quiet life I once thought I had lost forever. And whenever I remembered Evan telling me that leaving me had been the smartest thing he had ever done, I no longer felt anger because I finally understood the irony of his words. He had not escaped a life that was holding him back. He had walked away from a woman who would have loved him, a child who might once have called him daddy, and a home filled with the very happiness he later spent years trying to find. The greatest justice was never seeing him lonely or watching his new marriage fail, but waking up beside Marcus, hearing Lily laugh from the kitchen, and realizing that the life Evan rejected had become the life I would never trade for anything. Because sometimes the people who abandon us are not taking our future away, they are unknowingly making room for the people who will finally cherish us. And if this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends and family. We create entertaining and inspiring stories for our viewers, and your support helps us continue making great content for you.